I spent 31 years in the electrical trade. Started pulling wire in 1989 when I was 19, working for a contractor out of Morgantown, West Virginia, running conduit in coal company buildings, and eventually making my way up to master electrician, then field supervisor, then running my own small operation out of a shop behind my house on Grafton Road. That background matters more to this story than I expected when I sat down to tell it. Because the thing about being an electrician is that you learn, early, that a system looks fine until it doesn't. The lights are on, the panel's quiet, everything functions, and then one day something trips, and you pull the cover off, and you see what's been wrong underneath for years. You see the burn marks. You see the wire someone spliced wrong in 1974 and covered up and hoped for the best. My name is Gerald Merritt. I'm 63 years old. I live alone now in a house that has been fully rewired twice since I bought it in 1991. Because when you spend your professional life correcting other people's shortcuts, you don't tolerate them in your own walls. My son's name is Cody. He's 34. He lives about 40 minutes from me in Fairmont, in a house I helped him buy, in ways I'll get to. His wife's name is Brianna. She's 31. I knew from about the third month they were together that she came from a different understanding of how families work than anything I was familiar with. Her parents are from Clarksburg. Her father sells commercial insurance. They are not bad people. I want to be clear about that. They just have a way of assuming Brianna is the center of everything, and that whoever Brianna married should naturally agree. I did not agree. Cody did, because Cody loves her, and love makes you agree to things you would not otherwise. I understand that. What I don't understand, and probably never will, is how far the agreeing went. Let me go back further, because none of this starts with Brianna. My wife Donna passed in 2014. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which is the nature of that disease. Cody was 23, living in Morgantown, finishing a business degree he never really used. He came home for the funeral and stayed 3 months. That house is large when it's just you in it. Donna and I had been married 33 years. We met in 1981 at a church picnic in Grafton. She was a clerk at the Taylor County Courthouse, which is a job that will either make you organized or drive you out of your mind, and Donna had chosen organized. She balanced the checkbook to the penny every month. She kept a spiral-bound notebook in the kitchen junk drawer with every expense over $20 listed, what it was, which account it came from, the date. I asked her once why she tracked it like that. She said, "I want to know where we are at any given moment. I don't like surprises." It wasn't anxious. It was just the way she was wired. Deliberate. Precise. She never spent money on something without knowing exactly what it was for and what would be left after. That habit transferred to me, the way things do when you spend 33 years living alongside someone. I started keeping notes the way she kept notes. I started filing things the way she filed things. She would have called it contagious. I called it education. After Donna died, I reorganized everything. Rewrote my will, updated the property documents, had a long conversation with my attorney, Stanley Kofer, who has an office above the insurance agency on High Street, and who I've trusted since 1997. I did not do these things out of grief. I did them because I was 52. I owned a business, I owned property, and I had one child. That is a situation that requires documents. Any electrician will tell you the time to service a panel is before something fails, not after. I made Cody the beneficiary of everything, as you do, but I also kept meticulous records of everything I gave him, because that's who I am, and because Donna would have done the same, and because keeping records was the last active way I had of being the kind of person she'd married. I kept records of every tool I loaned, every invoice I paid, every hour I worked. At home, the same as on the job. Cody met Brianna in 2017. They married in 2019, at a converted barn venue outside Bridgeport that cost considerably more than I thought a barn should cost. I paid half. That figure was $14,200. I wrote the check without complaint. Donna would have wanted to be there, and I was trying to do what Donna would have done, which was give what was needed and not put a number on it. They bought the house in Fairmont in 2020. Cody had about $18,000 saved. The down payment needed was $47,000 to avoid mortgage insurance. He called and explained the math. I transferred $11,000 within the week, documented as a gift, not a loan. I was not expecting repayment. When the kitchen needed renovation in early 2022 and the contractor's estimate came in higher than expected, I put in $8,000. When the furnace went out in 2023, I paid $4,200 for the replacement. Every dollar went into the legal pad on my kitchen counter. The total, across 10 years, was $61,400. I didn't calculate that until November of 2024, when I sat with Stanley and we went through it together. The number sat in front of me for a long moment before I said anything. Things shifted slowly across those years. Slowly is exactly the right word. There was the Thanksgiving in 2021, when Brianna's father made a comment about the house being their investment in the kids' future, as if he'd contributed something beyond his presence. He hadn't. I moved the potatoes and let it go. There was Christmas 2022 when I arrived to find the bedroom I'd always used had been converted into a craft room for Brianna. I slept on the pullout. I told myself they needed the space. In 2023, Brianna's parents started coming for Christmas and staying. The guest room was theirs. I was on the pullout again. My back has been a problem since a fall off a 6-foot ladder in 2008. The pullout isn't a medical crisis. It's uncomfortable. But I am 62 years old. I drove an hour and 20 minutes in December, and the pullout was what was offered. If you've ever kept accepting what's offered and telling yourself it doesn't mean anything, you might want to stay for what comes next. Drop a comment below if you know that particular feeling. I read them all. Cody called me the week before Christmas 2024 with the logistics. His in-laws were arriving the 23rd, staying through the 26th. The guest room was theirs, naturally. He said it without apology, the way you say things when you've stopped considering they might require one. I asked where I'd sleep. He said, "Dad, we've got the pull-out." I told him my back had been bad. He said he knew, and he'd put an air mattress pad on the pull-out, which would help. He said Brianna's mother has knee problems and can't do the pull-out. I said, all right. I drove up on the 24th. The house was full. Brianna's father was talking loudly in the kitchen about a client. Her mother was at the counter. Cody was pleasant. The kids, Owen, who's 6, and Lily, who's 4, ran out and grabbed my legs when I came through the door. That part was good. Genuinely good. We ate dinner. The conversation stayed mostly between Brianna and her parents. Her father talked about a commercial property deal he was working on in Clarksburg, something with a medical office building. And I listened because listening is what you do at a table when the conversation isn't aimed at you. I answered when addressed, helped Owen cut his meat, said the ham was good, which it was. Brianna's mother told a long story about a hotel in Myrtle Beach they'd stayed at in September that had problems with the air conditioning. Cody nodded through most of it. After dinner, I helped with dishes. Brianna's mother sat down at the kitchen table. Her father poured himself a second whiskey and moved to the living room. Cody dried. I washed. The radio in the corner had a Christmas station on, the quiet instrumental kind. It was the most peaceful 15 minutes of the evening. Around 9, I told Cody I thought I'd get settled. He looked at me, then looked at Brianna across the room. Something passed between them that I've seen between married people when they've agreed on something beforehand and now have to say it. He said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." I said, "Go ahead." He said the pullout was going to Owen and Lily that night. They wanted both kids in the living room for the Christmas Eve experience. I said, "Okay." He said, "We've got the garage set up. Space heater, a cot. It's actually pretty comfortable. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in my body when he said that. My hand, still holding the dish towel, went still. I looked at him. He was looking at a point near the refrigerator. His jaw was set the way it gets when he's already decided something and is waiting for the pushback to end. Brianna's father took a drink of his whiskey and said nothing. I said, "The garage." He said, "It's heated, Dad. Just one night." I said, "Okay, Cody." He looked at me then, surprised I didn't push back. He said, "You're sure?" I said, "I'm going to get my bag from the car." Outside it was cold. December in West Virginia is not ambiguous about being December. I got my bag, stood in the driveway for a moment watching my own breath, then got in the front seat and called Stanley Kofer. I know what you're thinking. A lawyer on Christmas Eve. Stanley answers his phone. He is 71 years old and keeps hours that would embarrass men half his age. He picked up on the third ring. I told him what had just happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Gerald, we've been talking about this for 2 years. You want to do it now?" I said yes. He said he'd have something ready for the morning. I went back inside, said goodnight, and went to the garage. There was a cot near the back wall with a sleeping bag on it, a cheap space heater with orange coils that hummed when it ran. The garage smelled like motor oil and the cold that concrete holds no matter how much heat you put into a room. I sat on the cot for a while before I lay down. Cody keeps his tools on a pegboard the way I taught him, every tool in its outlined spot, which is one of the small things that tells you your time with a child was not entirely wasted. His truck was parked on the left side of the garage, a 2019 F-150 I'd put $3,000 toward when he bought it, which was not in the $61,400 figure, because I'd forgotten it until I sat in Stanley's office in November, and Stanley said, "What else?" for the third time, and I thought harder. I didn't add it. Some things you let go. I looked at my hands for a while. They are old hands, burned and cut and grease-stained across 31 years, and there are scars I don't bother remembering the stories of anymore. I thought about the $61,400. I thought about the direction that number represented. Then I lay down, zipped the sleeping bag up, and let the heater do what it could. 4.5 hours on a garage cot in December is not great, but it's enough. There are things I should tell you before Christmas morning. Things about the 2 years Stanley and I had been talking. After Donna died, the house on Grafton Road was mine outright. We'd paid it off in 2009. It sits on 2.5 acres with a workshop out back where I ran my business for 11 years. The county assessor had it at $218,000 at the last assessment. I wound the business down after I turned 60. The heavy work had become genuinely difficult. By mid-2023, I'd let the business license lapse. What I had was a paid house, some savings, and Social Security coming in a few years. What I was watching through 2022 and 2023 and into 2024 was a slow accumulation of suggestions from Cody about my future. Would I consider moving closer? Had I thought about what it would look like in 10 years alone on Grafton Road? Didn't I think Owen and Lily would want their grandfather nearby? Not unreasonable questions. Questions a son might ask out of genuine concern. Except, in October I was at their house for Owen's birthday. I came in from the backyard earlier than expected. Cody and Brianna were in the kitchen, and I heard my name and I stopped in the hall, which I'm not proud of. But I stopped. Brianna was saying the Grafton Roadhouse would probably clear $250 in spring. She was talking about a mother-in-law suite they could add off the back of the garage. She said he'd have his own space. He wouldn't even have to see my parents when they're here. Cody said he's going to want to stay in his house. Brianna said, "Your dad is 62, Cody. He has back problems and no one out there. He cannot stay in that house forever." Cody said, "I know." There was a pause. Then Brianna said, "The timing makes sense too, honestly. Spring market is strong in Taylor County right now." I went back out to the yard and counted to 60 before I came back in. Owen was chasing the dog around the yard, completely unaware that his grandfather was standing at the gate, having a specific and clarifying feeling about the future. When I came back inside, I sang "Happy Birthday" and ate cake and watched Owen open presents, and I said nothing about any of it. Not then. In November, I had a long conversation with Stanley. I told him what I'd heard. I told him about the years of small accommodations. I told him about the $61,400. I told him I was starting to understand the shape of something. Stanley said, "Gerald, do you know what you want to happen?" I said I wanted it to be legally clear what was mine and what I intended to do with it. He said he could help with that. If you found this today, this is me telling you why I'm bothering to tell it at all. I'm not someone who talks easily about personal things. I spent 40 years in a trade where you don't. But I stayed quiet too long, and quiet was costing me something. If that's something you understand, go ahead and subscribe. What I post, I mean. Christmas morning. I slept about 4.5 hours, washed my face at the utility sink, and came inside at 6:15 when I heard the kids up. The morning went the way Christmas mornings with small children go. Owen was convinced about Santa in a way that was still complete and total, and watching him work through the living room was the best part of the day by a long margin. Lily found a stuffed bear, named it on the spot, and didn't put it down. Cody made coffee and handed me a mug without being asked, and we stood together in the kitchen for a few minutes watching the kids. That was the closest thing to normal we had. Around 10:30, the adult gift exchange happened. Brianna's parents gave me a gift card to a home improvement store for $50. I gave Owen a model train set I'd spent 3 Saturdays restoring, because trains have been his thing since he was 3. I gave Lily an elaborate art supply situation that makes grandparents feel like heroes. I gave Cody and Brianna a new set of kitchen appliances they'd mentioned wanting, around $400. Then Brianna handed Cody a card-sized envelope and said it was from me, said it had been left on the front porch early that morning. I watched his face as he opened it. A plain Christmas card, the kind that comes in a box of 20. Inside was a handwritten note from Stanley Kofer, wishing the family a Merry Christmas, and advising Cody that a set of documents had been filed at the Monongalia County Recorder's Office and the Marion County Recorder's Office the previous week, with copies enclosed. Cody looked up at me. I looked back at him. He pulled out the first page, a recorded deed of trust on the Grafton Road property, naming a charitable remainder trust I'd established in November. The trust was irrevocable. The property could not be transferred, sold, or encumbered without the trustee's consent, Stanley, and the successor trustee, the West Virginia Community Foundation in Charleston. I retained full right to live there for the remainder of my life. After my death, the property went to 3 charities: the Grafton City Hospital Auxiliary Fund, the West Virginia Mountaineer Food Bank, and a scholarship fund at the Technical College where I got my journeyman certification in 1991. The house on Grafton Road would not be liquidated for anyone's renovation plans. Not now, not when I was 90, not ever. Cody went very still. Brianna's face had the look of someone running calculations faster than they could hide them. Her father set down his coffee mug. Cody turned to the second page. It was a summary of a revised will and gift inventory that documented every financial contribution I'd made to him since 2014. The wedding payment, the down payment, the kitchen renovation, the furnace. Total, $61,400. The document noted these were given freely as gifts, and I was not seeking return. But it noted that future estate calculations would account for these amounts as part of Cody's prior share. The room was quiet in a way it had not been all morning. Owen ran his new train around the track behind the couch. Lily explained something to her bear. The space heater ticked. Cody said, "Dad." I said, "Merry Christmas, son." He said, "When did you do this?" I said, "November." He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, You didn't ask. I'll be honest with you. I did not feel what I expected to feel. I'd expected something cleaner. What I actually felt was tired. Not from the garage cot, though 4.5 hours on a garage cot in December doesn't help. Tired in a longer sense. Brianna asked to see the papers. Cody handed them over. Her father looked over her shoulder. Her mother got very busy with the wrapping paper situation on the floor. Brianna said, "So you gave the house to a charity?" I said, "I retained the right to live there. After my death, it goes to charitable organizations. It's a standard instrument. You can call a real estate attorney on the 26th for a second opinion." She said, "We weren't planning to take your house, Gerald." I said, "I know." She said, "We were thinking about your future." I said, "I appreciate that." What I didn't say was that I'd heard her in the kitchen in October. I didn't say it because the conversation would have become about the overhearing. The documents had already said what needed saying. I didn't need to add anything. Brianna's father said, "Well, sounds like you've got everything handled, Gerald." The tone men use when they want to indicate a conversation is beneath them. I said, "I try to." I drove home that afternoon. Took me 1 hour and 40 minutes because there was a slow patch on 79 near Bridgeport, some kind of fender situation the state police were managing. I sat in the line for 20 minutes with the heat on and a country station playing something I didn't recognize, and I thought about the fact that in 31 years of working, I had never once sat in my truck for 20 minutes and felt this particular kind of empty. Not angry, not vindicated. Just empty in the way you feel when something you'd hoped would turn out differently has finished turning out the way it turned out. Cody had walked me to the car before I left. Dry, cold, different from the night before. He was still carrying the envelope. He said, "I didn't know you'd done this." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "Were you worried we were going to try to sell your house?" I said, "I was protecting something I built before you were born. That's what the trust is. It's not an accusation." He thought about it. He said, "I should have thought harder about the garage." I said, "You should have." He said he was sorry. He said it the way he says things when he means them. Plainly, without the softening language he adds when he's covering himself. Just, "I'm sorry about that." I said, "Okay." I got in the car. He stood in the driveway until I backed out. I want to say one thing about Stanley Kofer. When I signed the trust documents in November, after the notary left and everything was filed, he poured 2 small glasses of bourbon from a bottle in his bottom drawer and handed one to me. He said, "Gerald, your wife would have had this done 10 years ago." I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in a while, because he was right. Donna would have seen the shape of what was developing years before I did. She would have had the folder labeled, and the attorney called before I'd even noticed anything was wrong. Stanley said, "She told me once, probably around 2010, she said, 'Stanley, Gerald will give every last thing he has before he'll protect himself. Somebody's going to have to do it for him eventually.'" I held the bourbon glass without drinking it. He said, "She wasn't wrong." I said, "No, she wasn't." It's been about 6 months. Cody and I still talk, Sunday afternoons usually, mostly about Owen and Lily. I saw the kids in April, spent a Saturday with Owen working on the train set, which he has become very serious about. He has a notebook where he draws track layouts before he builds them. I recognized the notebook. It looked like something his grandmother would have kept. That was a good day. Brianna is civil. She texts when there's something involving the kids I should know about. I text back. We have not talked about Christmas or the trust or any of it, and I don't expect we will. There's a version of Brianna I think exists, somewhere under the planning and the calculating, who loves my son genuinely and is doing her best with what she understands. I hope that's true. I hope he's happy. That's not a performance. It's just what's true. Her parents I haven't seen since Christmas, which suits everyone fine, I imagine. The Grafton Road house is freshly painted on the exterior as of this spring. I hired 2 young guys from a painting crew in Grafton and supervised it myself because old habits. The front half of the workshop I've converted into a proper woodworking space. I found a decent used table saw at an estate sale in Philippi, and a jointer I spent 3 weekends getting back into working order. I've been making furniture. Started small, boxes and shelves, the things you make when you're figuring out how your hands work with a new tool. I made Owen a wooden train station with moving parts that took me 3 weeks and more sandpaper than I'd like to admit. Drove it up myself in March and spent an afternoon on the floor with him setting it up. He said, "Grandpa, how did you make this?" I said, "Very carefully." He said, "Can you teach me?" I said, "I've got time." If you've been watching these stories for a while and never hit the like button, I'm asking you directly. These are things that cost something to say. It helps to know someone found them worth their time. The money is the part some people want a clear accounting of. The trust cost me nothing in my lifetime. The $61,400 is documented and will be accounted for in whatever is left when I'm gone. I was never trying to recover it. What I was trying to establish was that the record exists, that it is real, that the labor and the sacrifice are not invisible things that can be renamed or forgotten when it becomes inconvenient for someone else to remember them. I think about that sometimes when I'm in the woodworking shop. There's something honest about wood. You can see the grain, where it'll split if you push it wrong, where the strength is. You can't fake it into being something it's not. You work with what it actually is. That is either a metaphor or it isn't, depending on the kind of person you are. That is the thing about being an electrician. You spend your career making systems work, and making them safe, and making them last. The only way to know a system is sound is to have the documentation, the plans, the permits, the inspection records. You don't keep those because you expect the walls to catch fire. You keep them because you know the walls might, and you want to be able to show exactly what happened, and when, and by whom. Donna used to say that the hardest thing about being the capable one in a family is that nobody asks if you're all right. They ask for help, they ask for money, they ask for advice, but not if you're all right, because they've decided, without asking, that you are fine and will remain fine, and that fine is simply your natural state. I don't know that she was wrong. What I know is that I am 63 years old. I live alone in a house that is legally protected and fully paid. I have a woodworking shop, a grandson who wants to learn to make things from wood, and a lawyer who knew my wife, keeps bourbon in his bottom drawer, and answers his phone on Christmas Eve. I sleep in my own bed, not a garage cot, not a pull-out with a pad on top, my own bed. Some things you have to stop waiting for permission to protect. I waited too long. When I finally stopped, the protection I needed turned out to have been sitting in a file drawer at Stanley Kofer's office the whole time, right where I'd put it, patient as copper wire in the wall, waiting for the switch to close.